Hello, my lovelies. So welcome to our yoga teaching tip of the week. And I'm sad to say this is our last one, but do not panic. It is stopping my weekly video, stopping to make way for my weekly podcast. Woo! So I am away next week. That's half term. And then when you come back from half term, keep your eyes out for that first week in June. My podcast trailer, all being well, will be going live. So the podcast, if you haven't seen already, is called Prosperous Yogini, and the whole mission behind the podcast is to help female yoga teachers and other wellness entrepreneurs create profitable, sustainable yoga businesses and businesses that they and their students love. I cannot wait to get going. However, I'm here with you now with my teaching tip of the week. And this has been coming up quite a bit for my trainee teachers who are nearly at the end of their course, nearly going out into the world to teach yoga. Don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to planning. Value repetition. Don't assume that your students are going to find something if you do it again, if you repeat yourself, boring. So we can get ourselves stuck into our mindset belief that we've always got to be generating exciting, creative, new ideas, lesson plans. And I know, because I've been there, I've done that. We can spend hours crafting this new sequence and spend hours doing it, all for an hour's class. And then you start the whole process again, because you're telling yourself next time you turn up to teach that group that it's got to be new and exciting again. So as you may know, I used to be a classroom music teacher many years ago now, but a typical day would include perhaps teaching year 7 for an hour, year 8, GCSE, an A-level class, back to back, no break. And, as a teacher in that environment, you learn very quickly that, you cannot every day be delivering at your absolute max or you're burnt out. And it's the same as a yoga teacher. You just need to take the pressure off yourself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are some wonderful sequences out there. We use the Mark Stevenson's yoga sequencing book as part of our yoga teacher training course. But also I say to my trainees, look, why don't you copy the lesson I did for that? Why don't you copy the lesson I did for that? You don't have to create your own new sequences all the time. Sometimes it can be really exciting, really creative, really good fun to get down onto your mat and to have a blank piece of paper and create something new, something that's from your years of practice, your years of experience. That's lovely, and please don't stop doing that. But sometimes we have something called life. Maybe we have a busy week, maybe we have a poorly family member. We don't feel so great and we've got to reserve some energy elsewhere. It's totally fine to teach something you've taught before. It is totally acceptable to repeat something you did last week. Your students benefit from repetition. How do young children learn? Through routine and repetition. So give yourself permission to not always having to be creating new classes, new exciting class content for your students. It is totally okay to copy other people. Where do you think I got all of my ideas for my classes from? For sure, I made up a few sequences from my own practice, but I've largely been copying other teachers that I trained with, that I work with. And I know that little inner voice goes, well, that's not authentic if I'm copying something else. What does it mean to be authentic? It means to be truthful to you. So, if I start next week setting up chanting workshops, personally, that's not going to be overly authentic. I don't regularly practice chanting. It's not part of my practice. That wouldn't be so authentic for me to do that. But if I been working with a yoga teacher, and we've been doing loads of work, let's say on arm balances, and I wanted to take all of that work that I'd been physically doing and share it with my students. That's authentic. It's something that I've experienced, and then I'm sharing from my place of experience and practice with my students. So take the pressure off yourselves when it comes to planning. I have a mega message with my training teachers, and it is always work smarter, not harder. Where possible, limit the amount of time that you're investing into planning. You know, planning, of course, has a purpose. You want to be able to turn up to that class and feel confident about what you're going to share with your students, and also feel confident that it's something that is achievable and benefiting them, of course. But you've got to remember that planning is part of like what I call the back office work. You're not necessarily getting paid unless you've been really good and calculated it into your hourly rate of what you're charging. So be careful that you're not spending hours planning or feeling that you need to plan, feeling that you needing to always come up with something new. It is totally acceptable to take your inspiration from another class that you've gone to repeat the class that you've already taught, to have a look at a YouTube video, practice that and think, that would work for my students, to grab a book, to take an idea out of a book, copy that would work well for my students. And then for those of you that have a busy teaching schedule, perhaps you're teaching different people, different demographics. I'll give you an example. Maybe you've got a chair yoga class followed by a vinyasa class. Now, what I would do in that circumstances, and I do this all the time, I teach an evening pregnancy class followed by a yin yoga class. I'll often have the same thing. So let's go back to our imaginary chair yoga class followed by a vinyasa class. Two very different classes, two very different demographics and audiences. But could I reduce my planning load by having the same thing that would work for both classes? Maybe even exploring the same postures, like perhaps you're going to focus on tree pose and warrior two and grounding. That works for chair yoga, that works for vinyasa yoga. So you're not there having to plan extra stuff. So the message from today, repetition, routine is good for your students, okay? You don't always need to be creating new and inspiring sequences. Just turn up for your students every week to practice yoga together. They'll love you. Don't put pressure on yourself to endlessly be reinventing the wheel. Work smarter, not harder. Okay, my lovelies, that's my last teaching tip video for a while, but I will be back in about 2 weeks' time with my podcast. I'm also going to be videoing my podcast, so if you prefer to listen to what I have to say on video, you'll be able to still catch me on video, catch me on YouTube. Really excited to keep your eye out. My Prosperous Yogini podcast is coming soon. Behind the scenes, tech overwhelm, but it is coming soon. I will see you all soon, my lovelies.